How could you do this?
I didn't mean to.
The envelope was black, sleek, heavy, the kind of paper that whispered money before it even said a word. Amelia found it wedged halfway through her rusted apartment mailbox, stark and deliberate, like a hand-delivered threat. Her name was scrawled. In an elegant silver ink she instantly recognized. Richard Hale's signature taste. Minimalist. Expensive. Cold. Her hands trembled before she even opened it. She hadn't touched anything with his name in 3 years. Divorce decrees and custody papers had all come digitally, through lawyers. This felt personal. She slid a finger beneath the seal. The card inside gleamed white against the black sleeve, embossed in gold lettering. Richard Hale and Charlotte Whitmore invite you to celebrate their engagement. Her breath snagged. For a second, she thought the words might blur, rearrange into something more merciful. But they didn't. Beneath the names was the date, the location, the Grand Regency Hotel. Of course, that marble palace where Richard once promised her forever in front of 200 guests. Her knees buckled, and she pressed against the wall for balance. It wasn't an invitation. It was a message, a weapon. He wanted her there, to stand as proof of his triumph, his upgrade from her to someone younger, wealthier, fresher. A public exhibition of her defeat. The card slipped from her fingers onto the cracked linoleum floor. For minutes, Amelia just stared at it. Her chest ached as though something sharp was lodged beneath her ribs. "Mommy?" The voice was soft. Too soft. Amelia blinked, wiping quickly at her eyes, but it was too late. The twins stood in the doorway of the kitchen, still in their pajamas. Oliver, with his stormy brown eyes, held his sister's hand tightly, as though the world was already something to brace against. Emma clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest, her curls a tangled halo. "Why are you crying?" Emma asked. Amelia's throat tightened. She wanted to say I'm not. She wanted to smile, distract, change the subject. But her children had already learned to read the truth in silence. She crouched down, pulling them both close. Their warmth filled the hollowness inside her. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they remember things that hurt. She whispered. Oliver frowned. "Did Daddy hurt you again?" The question stabbed deeper than any blade. She swallowed, forcing calm into her voice. "Daddy and we don't live together anymore. That hurt for a while, but it doesn't hurt like it used to." Emma pressed the rabbit against Amelia's cheek as if to dry her tears. "Then why are you sad now?" Amelia looked over her daughter's shoulder, at the card gleaming on the floor like a taunt. She didn't want them to know. Didn't want them to see their father's cruelty distilled into embossed letters. But hiding it felt like letting Richard win again. So she stood, picked it up, and showed them. "It's an invitation," she said. "Daddy is getting married again." Oliver's face twisted. "To that lady?" "Yes, to Charlotte." Emma tilted her head. "But aren't you supposed to marry forever?" Amelia almost laughed. Almost. But the sound died in her throat. Sometimes people forget what forever means. The twins looked at her in silence. And in their silence, Amelia saw the truth. She couldn't collapse here. Not in front of them. Not now. Later, when the twins settled into cartoons, Amelia sat alone at the kitchen table, the invitation beside her like a coiled snake. Her mind replayed Richard's smirk, the way he'd look at her across that glittering ballroom, hand on Charlotte's waist, whispering something cruel behind polished teeth. He wanted her to shrink, to become small in the glare of his success. "Don't go." That was the voice of self-preservation. "Walk away. Protect what's left of you." But another voice, the one she thought had died the day Richard stripped her of dignity in divorce court, whispered louder. "Show him." The idea rooted itself quickly. Not revenge in the screaming, glass-smashing way. No, something quieter, stronger. A statement. She didn't need to tear him down. All she needed was to stand there, unbroken, with the proof of the life she'd built. Two small hands in hers. She imagined the scene. The room full of Richard's investors, colleagues, admirers. Whispers rising as she entered. His mask cracking. Charlotte faltering under the weight of comparison. The thought steadied her breath. For 3 years, she had been silent. A ghost of herself. But ghosts don't stay buried forever. Her phone buzzed. A message from her sister, Claire. Claire, got the invite? Amelia stared. Of course. Claire always knew. Amelia, yes. I think he wants to humiliate me. The reply was instant. Claire, then don't let him. Go. But go on your terms. Amelia looked toward the living room where Oliver and Emma were giggling at the cartoon dog on screen. Their laughter was her armor. She typed back with steady fingers. Amelia, I will. That night, after the twins were asleep, Amelia sat by the window with a glass of cheap red wine. The city outside hummed with life, but her mind was already in that ballroom. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she remembered, lines carved by betrayal and survival. But behind the weariness was something sharper, resolve. For years, she had told herself that moving on meant disappearing, rebuilding quietly, staying out of Richard's orbit. But maybe moving on meant something else. Maybe it meant walking back into the fire without burning. She touched the window pane as if tracing the outline of her future. Richard thought she was still broken. He thought motherhood had made her weak. He thought she was alone. He was wrong. The next morning, Oliver climbed onto her bed, his hair wild from sleep. Mommy, are you still sad? He asked. Amelia kissed his forehead. Not sad, just thinking about Daddy's party. Yes. He frowned, as though considering something far too big for a 5-year-old. Then he nodded. We should go. Me and Emma too. So he sees us. Her breath caught. Children had a way of cutting to the bone of truth. She pulled him close, whispering against his hair. Yes. We'll go. All of us. And in that moment, her decision crystallized. She would not be his shadow, his failure, his cautionary tale. She would be the storm he never saw coming. Richard Hale wanted her to arrive broken. Instead, she would arrive whole, with the only legacy that mattered. Amelia hadn't meant to open the box that was tucked beneath her bed. Taped and dusty, the kind of box you only touch when moving houses or moving on. But after the invitation arrived, after she decided she would walk into that ballroom with her head high, she found herself on the floor at midnight, slicing through the tape with shaking fingers. Inside, the remnants of another life. A wedding photo, corners curled. Richard's arm draped around her, tuxedo sharp, grin wide. Her dress glittered like it belonged in a fairy tale. She remembered the weight of that veil, the champagne toasts, the way he whispered in her ear during the first dance. It's us against the world now. She closed her eyes, hearing it as though he were still behind her. For years, she'd believed him. For years, she'd given him everything. Back then, Richard was just a hungry young executive with a plan. He didn't have the empire yet, just a startup idea, a head full of ambition, and a smile that could part oceans. Amelia, he said one night in their tiny kitchen, balancing a stack of papers and a bottle of cheap wine. This company, it's not just business. It's us, our future. Imagine what we can build. She remembered laughing, barefoot in that kitchen, flour on her hands from baking bread they couldn't really afford. Our future, she teased. You make it sound like I'm co-founder. You are, he said, deadly serious. He kissed the flour off her fingertips. You're the reason I'll make it. Without you, I'm just hungry. With you, I'm unstoppable. And she believed him. She quit her marketing job to manage his books. She poured her savings, every cent, into his startup. She sat up late at night running projections, rewriting pitch decks, learning the language of venture capital so she could coach him before meetings. She was his anchor, his cheerleader, his unpaid partner. And when the investors came knocking, she was there too, smiling in the background, presenting him as the polished visionary they needed. IT started changing when the money came. IT first it was subtle, longer hours, unanswered texts. Then it was the dinners she wasn't invited to, the business trips that stretched into weekends. One night, she waited up for him, a cold plate of pasta on the table. He stumbled in past midnight, smelling of bourbon and perfume that wasn't hers. Richard, she whispered, where were you? He waved her off, loosening his tie. Networking. With who? People who matter, he snapped. Don't start, Amelia. You know what's at stake. She stared at him, the man who once couldn't stop telling her she mattered more than the world. Now, apparently, she was an obstacle. The betrayal came in papers. Just sign, Richard urged one Saturday morning, sliding a contract across their marble countertop. By then the house was large, the cars foreign, the The kitchen twice the size of their first apartment. "What is this?" she asked. "Just a restructuring." "Legal nonsense. My lawyers say it's better if the shares are consolidated under my name. Less messy for the board." Her chest tightened. "But these are our shares. This company was ours." He leaned closer, voice low, like he was soothing a child. "Amelia, this is still for us. For the family. You trust me, don't you?" The way he said family broke her. He knew it was her weak spot. "I trust you," she whispered, signing her name. And with a few strokes of ink, she erased herself from the empire she had helped build. The end came quickly after that. He stopped. Coming home. When he did, he looked through her instead of at her. She found lipstick stains once on his collar, then stopped checking. Finally, the conversation that shattered everything. "Richard," she said, standing in the doorway of his office. "We can't go on like this." He didn't even look up. From his laptop. "You're right. We can't." Silence. Then, "I want a divorce." Her legs went numb. "A divorce? After everything? You're not what I need anymore." He closed the laptop, finally meeting her eyes. His were cold, calculating. "You'll be fine, Amelia. You'll have the house. Some money. But this," he gestured around the office, the empire humming outside those walls. "This is mine." She opened her mouth to scream, to beg, to fight. But nothing came out. The courtroom was worse. His lawyers painted her as unstable, bitter, unfit to share custody. They produced photographs of her looking tired, disheveled, taken after nights she hadn't slept from crying. They dissected her spending, her parenting, her worth. Richard sat at the plaintiff's table with his polished suit and his perfect smirk, as though the entire trial were a business meeting he had already won. The judge's ruling was merciless. Richard retained majority custody rights, the mansion, the company, everything. Amelia left with weekend visits and a modest settlement, barely enough to keep her afloat. She remembered standing outside the courthouse that day, the wind sharp against her face, thinking, "This is how it feels to be erased." Now, sitting on the floor with the box of ghosts, Amelia let the memories wash over her like acid. The wedding photos slipped from her hands. Next came the old pitch decks, annotated in her handwriting. Receipts from dinners she covered when Richard had forgotten. His wallet, a note he once left on her desk. "Couldn't do this without you." She laughed bitterly. He had done it without her. No, he had done it by using her. The humiliation burned again, fresh as ever. But beneath it was something sharper, something cleaner, resolve. She wasn't the woman who signed papers in blind trust anymore. She wasn't the woman who walked out of court humiliated and hollow. She wasn't the woman who disappeared into an apartment with nothing but twins and survival. She was the woman who had rebuilt, who had 2 children who adored her, who looked at her not as failure, but as home, and she would not let Richard use her again. The gala invitation sat on the table, waiting. For the first time, Amelia saw it not as a weapon, but as an opportunity. Richard wanted her to play the role of the discarded ex-wife. Instead, she would rewrite the script. She traced the gold lettering with her finger and whispered to herself, "This won't be your stage, Richard. It'll be mine." Her reflection in the darkened window behind the table looked different now. Not broken, not erased, determined. For the first time in years, Amelia felt the stirring of something she thought she had lost. Power. Amelia had never thought of herself as a soldier. But in the days after the invitation, her every move felt like strategy, her every thought a weapon being sharpened. Richard wanted her humiliated. He expected her to walk into that ballroom looking small, cheap, and broken. She would do the opposite. She would arrive like a queen stepping into her own court, and queens prepare for war. The first step was armor. Amelia hadn't worn anything expensive in years. Her wardrobe consisted of discount dresses and jeans patched at the knees. But this night would not allow compromise. She called a boutique she hadn't stepped foot in since before the divorce. "Maison de Verre, how may I help you?" Her voice nearly trembled, but she steadied it. "This is Amelia Hale. I need an evening gown. Something custom. Something that makes people stop breathing." There was a pause on the line. Then a woman's polite but clipped voice. "Mrs. Hale, Miss Hale," Amelia corrected coldly. "And don't worry, I'll pay up front." The appointment was set. When she walked into the boutique days later, the attendant's eyes flicked over her discount heels, her plain bag, her unstyled hair. She felt the old sting of shame rising, then pushed it down. The fitting room mirrors reflected back a woman she barely recognized once the gowns were draped over her shoulders. Silks, sequins, velvet. She settled on one, a deep sapphire blue, cut clean, sculpting her like it had been waiting for her all along. Standing there, she whispered to her reflection, not his ex-wife, not his failure, his reckoning. Next came the twins. Claire, Amelia said over the phone, "I need you that night." Her sister's voice was warm, steady. "I assumed you would. The twins will stay with me. They'll be spoiled rotten." Amelia hesitated. I was thinking of bringing them." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, "Are you sure? That's not exactly a child-friendly circus." "I don't want them paraded," Amelia said firmly. "But I also don't want to hide them. They are proof. Proof I survived him. Proof I built something beautiful without him." Claire exhaled slowly. "If that's what you need, then we'll make it work." "But Amelia, if he tries to twist it, you'll need more than a dress and 2 children." Amelia's jaw tightened. "That's why I need you." Claire was more than a sister. She was a lawyer, a sharp one. She had stood by Amelia during the divorce, even when Amelia was too broken to stand for herself. Now, Claire spread files across her dining table like maps of a battlefield. "Look at this," Claire said, pointing to an article. 3 years ago, Richard's company settled a harassment claim. It barely made the press. Confidentiality agreements shut it down. But I dug deeper. That wasn't the only one. Amelia leaned forward, heart pounding. "How many?" Claire's eyes were hard. "At least 5. Maybe more." The pages turned. Bank records. Leaked emails. A whistleblower blog half buried online. One line in particular made Amelia's skin crawl. RH knew. He approved payouts personally. Fraud. Harassment. Hush money. The empire Richard built wasn't marble, it was glass. And glass shatters. Amelia stared at the pile. "Why hasn't anyone gone after him?" "Because he pays well," Claire said. "And because people are afraid." "But if someone speaks at the right time, with the right audience," Amelia finished. The sentence in a whisper. "Like a ballroom full of investors and press." Claire smiled thinly. "Exactly." Preparation became obsession. While the twins colored in the living room, Amelia sat at the kitchen table scribbling notes. Phrases, reminders, fragments of truth she could drop like poison into casual conversations at the gala. Not accusations, just seeds. Enough to crack his perfect facade. "Mommy." Emma patted in, dragging her rabbit. "Why are you writing so much?" Amelia pulled her onto her lap. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, you have to practice being strong before you stand in front of people who want you to be weak." Emma pressed her small hand against Amelia's cheek. "You're already strong." The words undid her. She kissed Emma's curls fiercely, whispering, "That's because of you." The night before the gala, Amelia couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the courtroom where Richard stripped her of dignity. The way he smirked when the judge ruled in his favor. The way the reporters wrote headlines about the bitter ex-wife. He had won then. But this time was different. This wasn't about begging for scraps. This wasn't about survival. This was about showing the world that Richard Hale's empire was built on the bones of people he used and discarded. And this time, Amelia wouldn't be silent. Claire poured them both coffee the next morning, watching. Amelia carefully. "You're ready?" Amelia adjusted the sapphire gown laid out on the couch, shimmering even in the dull light. "I'm ready." Her sister reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Then remember this. You don't need to destroy him tonight. Just remind people he can bleed." Amelia nodded, repeating the words like a mantra. "He can bleed. He can bleed." The twins barreled into the kitchen, giggling, oblivious to the war their mother was about to walk into. Oliver tugged her hand. "Are we still going with you?" Amelia crouched down, meeting his eyes. "Yes, you'll walk with me. Both of you. Because you're not just my children, you're my victory." He frowned, not understanding, but hugged her anyway. And in his embrace, Amelia felt the truth. This wasn't only revenge. It was legacy. She was fighting so her children would never learn to bow to men like Richard. When the car arrived to take them to the hotel, Amelia stood in the mirror one last time. Sapphire silk clung like second skin. Hair pinned in waves. Makeup sharp, precise. She looked like someone reborn, not the woman who signed away her future in ink. Not the woman who walked out of court erased. This was a woman sharpened by fire. She slipped the invitation into her clutch, not because she needed it, but because she wanted the reminder. Richard had invited her to be humiliated. Instead, she would arrive as his undoing. The Grand Regency Hotel loomed like a cathedral of glass and gold, its chandeliers blazing through tall windows. Black cars lined the curb, spilling out men in tailored suits and women shimmering like liquid jewels. Photographers clustered at the entrance, flashes firing as though the night itself needed to be documented. From inside the car, Amelia inhaled slowly. Sapphire silk hugged her frame like armor. On either side of her, Oliver and Emma fidgeted, with excitement, oblivious to the war their mother was about to wage. "Mommy," Emma whispered, eyes wide at the lights. "Is this a castle?" Amelia smiled faintly. Something like that. But castles had kings. And tonight, she had come to unseat one. The driver opened her door. Amelia stepped out, heels, striking the pavement with the confidence of someone who belonged. Even if the last time she had walked this path, she had been his wife. The twins climbed out behind her, each clutching a small hand in hers. The effect was instant. Flashbulbs exploded. Heads turned. Conversations stuttered mid-sentence. For a moment, silence rippled across the red carpet as the crowd registered what they were seeing. Richard Hale's discarded ex-wife, radiant, with 2 children at her side like living proof she had not disappeared. Whispers rose. "Is that? She brought the kids? She looks incredible." Amelia kept her chin high, her smile calm, her grip on her children steady. Inside, the ballroom glowed with opulence. Gold drapes, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing something elegant and forgettable. Waiters floated by with champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. And there, at the center of it all, stood Richard. He hadn't changed. Same sharp tuxedo, same practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Beside him, Charlotte glittered in. A dress of pale champagne silk, the perfect accessory. Young, flawless, camera-ready. Richard's gaze found Amelia instantly. His smirk curved like a blade. "There you are," his eyes said. "Right where I want you." But then his expression flickered, just for a heartbeat. His gaze dropped to the twins holding her hands. The smirk faltered. Amelia savored it like wine. "Amelia." Richard's voice was smooth as polished stone when she finally approached. "You came." He kissed the air near her cheek, his cologne sharp, suffocating. "I wasn't sure you'd be brave enough." Amelia met his eyes, calm fire burning beneath her smile. "Oh, Richard, you should know by now, I don't do what's expected." Charlotte stepped forward, her perfect lips stretched into something between a smile and a sneer. "It's lovely to see you," she said, though her voice trembled. Her eyes flicked nervously to the twins. "And these must be my children," Amelia interrupted, her tone soft but cutting. "Oliver and Emma." The twins stared at Charlotte with wide, unblinking curiosity. She faltered under their gaze. Richard cleared his throat. "Why don't we get you a drink? You look like you could use one." Amelia tilted her head, her smile widening just enough. "I'm fine. I never drink when I need a clear head." The subtle jab landed. Richard's jaw tightened as the night unfolded. Amelia moved through the ballroom like smoke, untouchable, undeniable. Every whisper followed her. "She looks better than ever." Charlotte must be furious. "Do you think Richard knew she'd bring the kids?" Investors approached her with polite curiosity, drawn less by loyalty to Richard and more by the spectacle. Amelia offered warm but restrained smiles, never overplaying her hand. At a T1 point, she passed 2 executives murmuring near the bar. "I heard rumors," one whispered. "Settlements. Payouts. Nothing proven," the other replied. "But still, where there's smoke." Amelia allowed herself a quiet smile. Seeds planted. Richard tried to regain control. He clinked a glass, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us to celebrate love, partnership, and the future." His arm slid around Charlotte's waist, pulling her close as cameras flashed. "Charlotte has given me more than I could have imagined. Together, we'll, funny." Amelia's voice carried across the room, smooth and deliberate. "That's exactly what you once said about me." Gasps rippled. Heads turned. Richard's smile froze. "Amelia," he said tightly, "this isn't the time." "Oh, relax," she purred, sipping her champagne at last. I'm only reminiscing. Everyone loves a good origin story, don't they? Her gaze swept the crowd. Several guests leaned in, eager for scandal that Charlotte's cheeks flushed crimson. Richard squeezed her waist so hard she winced. Later, in the quiet of a side corridor, Richard cornered Amelia. His mask slipped. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed. Amelia faced him squarely, her twins waiting a few feet away with Claire, who had just arrived as backup. "Walking into the room you invited me to," she said coolly. "Didn't you want me here? Not like this. Not dragging." He lowered his voice, glancing at the children. "Them into it. They're not props, Richard. They're proof. Proof I built something beautiful when you thought you destroyed me." His eyes darkened. "Careful, Amelia. You don't want to make enemies." She smiled, dangerous and calm. "No, but I'm not afraid of them anymore." When she returned to the ballroom, the tide had shifted. Richard's speech had fallen flat. Charlotte hovered at his side, brittle and uncomfortable. The whispers had grown teeth. Amelia stood near the edge of the dance floor, watching him drown in the very spotlight he had lit for himself. For the first time in years, she felt taller than him. Oliver tugged her dress. "Mommy, can we go home now?" She knelt, cupping his face. "Yes, sweetheart. We've done what we came to do." As she rose, she caught Richard's eyes one last time. Calm fire met boiling rage. And in that silent exchange, she knew the humiliation he had planned for her was his to carry now. The gala wasn't his victory, it was the beginning of his unraveling. The music swelled as the ballroom pulsed with champagne and chatter. For a while, Amelia let herself linger at the edges, watching the cracks widen in Richard's carefully polished kingdom. He had expected her to wilt. Instead, every whisper in the room orbited around her. It was only a matter of time before he struck back, and he chose the cruelest way. Public humiliation. Richard raised his glass once more, his smile gleaming under the chandeliers. "Friends, partners, family," he began, his voice rich with charm. "Tonight isn't just about love, it's about growth, about building futures." And speaking of futures, his eyes flicked toward Amelia. "Some of us know how difficult it can be to build one alone." The crowd shifted, eyes cutting between them. Amelia's heart beat steady. She knew this tone, Richard's mask of mockery disguised as charm. "Not everyone has the resources to thrive after divorce," he continued smoothly. "But Amelia has shown us all that even single mothers can survive on modest means of course." Truly inspiring. Laughter trickled around the room, nervous and complicit. Amelia felt Oliver's small hand tighten around hers, Emma pressing close to her leg. For a split second, shame burned hot, but then she breathed. "Not tonight," she lifted her own glass. "Thank you, Richard." Her voice carried, calm and clear. "Yes, it's true. Starting over with 2 children isn't easy. But I learned something valuable." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "Sometimes survival teaches you more than power ever could." A ripple of murmurs followed. Richard's jaw tensed. Amelia took a delicate sip of champagne, then added, almost casually, "And besides, modest means don't vanish overnight. Not unless you've mismanaged them." Several heads snapped toward her. A few investors exchanged looks. Richard froze, then forced a laugh. Amelia always did have a sharp tongue. Don't take her too seriously. But the seed was planted. Later, near the buffet, Richard cornered her again, this time with his arm draped protectively around Charlotte, as though shielding her. His voice rang louder than necessary, drawing deliberate attention. "Amelia," he said, "you've always had interesting ideas about business. Though, if memory serves, numbers weren't your strong suit. Maybe that's why you were so quick to sign away your shares." Gasps. A few stifled chuckles. Amelia smiled sweetly. "Oh, Richard, you're right. I did sign. Because I trusted you. My mistake." Her eyes gleamed. "Though I hear trust has been a problem for others too. Some women, some employees. But don't worry, I won't bore your guests with the details of all those settlements." The air thickened. Investors stiffened. One woman at the bar coughed into her drink. Charlotte's hand twitched on Richard's arm. "Richard?" she whispered, panic flickering in her eyes that Richard's face reddened. He forced another brittle laugh. "You always did have a wild imagination. Amelia, perhaps one day you'll learn not to slander the father of your children." Her gaze didn't waver. "I don't slander. I remember." The whispers spread like wildfire. Amelia watched as board members leaned close to each other, murmuring. A pair of journalists, invited for the glamour of the engagement, scribbled in notepads. The music and laughter carried on, but the tone of the room had shifted. Richard knew it too. She could see it in the twitch of his jaw, the way his hand gripped Charlotte's waist as though anchoring himself. His empire wasn't collapsing yet, but the ground beneath it had started to tremble. When he finally dragged her into a secluded corner near the coat room, his mask shattered completely. "You bitch," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Amelia stood still, her posture calm, refusing to give him the satisfaction of flinching. "I only told the truth. You humiliated me." She tilted her head. "Funny, that was supposed to be my role tonight, wasn't it?" His face contorted, rage flickering past the smooth CEO mask. For the first time in years, Amelia saw the man beneath, the insecure boy who built a kingdom out of smoke and mirrors. "Careful," he growled, stepping closer. "I can take those kids from you with a snap of my fingers." Her blood went cold, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she leaned in, voice sharp as glass. "Try, and I'll make sure every one of those investors knows exactly where their money's gone. I'll make sure every journalist here hears from the women you paid off. You don't scare me anymore, Richard." For a heartbeat, silence. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His hand clenched at his side. Then he forced a smile, mask snapping back into place. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic." He turned, sharply, leaving her in the corridor. But his footsteps carried fury, not triumph. Amelia returned to the ballroom, her heart pounding, but her shoulders straight. Claire met her near the doors, eyes sharp. "You did it," Claire murmured. "Not yet," Amelia said. "But he knows now. I won't play his game. Not anymore." She looked across the room. Richard was laughing too loudly with a group of executives, his charm cracking at the edges. Charlotte stood beside him, pale and tense. Amelia tightened, her grip on her twin's hands. The gala had begun as Richard's theater, his attempt to parade her as a failure. Instead, it had become her battlefield, and she was leaving victorious as the car pulled away from the glowing palace of glass and gold. Amelia looked at her children, safe and drowsy in their seats. The city lights blurred past. Richard would fight back. Of that she had no doubt. He always did. But tonight proved something important, that he wasn't untouchable. And for the first time since the divorce, Amelia felt the thrill of power return. Not the kind that came from money or status, but the kind born from truth that Richard's mask had cracked. And once a mask cracked, it never fit the same again. The headlines hit like sparks in dry grass, spreading faster than Richard's PR team could smother them. CEO's ex returns with twins, scandal at engagement party. Hale empire cracks, whispers of settlements and shadows. Humiliation in glass and gold. Richard Hale confronted by ex-wife. Photos circulated across glossy magazine sites. Amelia in her emerald gown, chin lifted, twins clutching her hands. Richard beside Charlotte, his jaw tight, smile brittle. A single clip, captured on someone's phone, went viral. Richard leaning in toward Amelia, face dark, while she whispered something back with ice in her eyes. The internet did the rest. Hashtags bloomed overnight. Speculation turned into suspicion. And Amelia? She said nothing. Claire slid her phone across Amelia's kitchen counter the next morning, the screen aglow with articles. "You're everywhere. And you didn't even open your mouth to the press." Amelia poured coffee, steady hands betraying the adrenaline still burning in her veins. "Richard's doing enough talking for both of us." Claire smirked. "He's scrambling. He sent a statement at 3 a.m. We are thrilled to celebrate love and success, and ask for privacy regarding baseless claims." She snorted. Classic overcompensation. Amelia sipped her coffee, glancing toward the living room where Oliver and Emma were building a castle of blocks. Their giggles cut through the storm. "I don't want them to see any of this." "They won't," Claire said firmly. "That's what I'm here for." "But Amelia, this is the moment. He's vulnerable. You need to decide how far you're willing to go." Amelia's jaw tightened. She had spent years in silence, years letting Richard's narrative define her. That night at the gala had been the first time she cracked it open. Now the world was watching, and she wasn't going to waste it. Across the city, Richard was unraveling. The boardroom of Hale Technologies was silent except for the clicking of pens and the muted hum of the air conditioner. Richard stood at the head of the table, suit immaculate but his tie slightly askew, a sheen of sweat on his brow. "We need to release another statement," he said, voice sharp. "Stronger. Emphasize growth, innovation. Shift focus back to the merger." One board member, an older man with silver hair, cleared his throat. "The concern, Richard, isn't just optics. Investors are asking about settlements, confidential agreements." His tone was careful, but the implication cut deep. Richard slammed a folder shut. "Rumors. Lies." Another voice, this time a woman in a tailored suit. "They're not treating them like rumors. If your ex-wife has knowledge." Richard's fists clenched at his side. "She doesn't." But his tone betrayed him. Back in her small but sunlit apartment, Amelia sat across from a journalist named Maya Torres, recorder resting between them. That Maya's reputation preceded her. Fearless, relentless, skilled at exposing corruption. She had reached out the morning after the gala. Amelia had hesitated until she remembered Richard's hissed threat near the coat room. "I can take those kids from you." "Not this time." Maya leaned forward. "You don't have to go on record yet. But if you confirm what you implied at the gala, settlements, misconduct, it opens a door. People are already digging." Amelia exhaled slowly. Her eyes flicked to a photo of the twins taped to the fridge. Their gap-toothed smiles steadied her. "I won't let him paint me as bitter. This isn't revenge, it's truth. And truth matters, doesn't it?" Maya's gaze softened. "It does. And the more silent you remain, the louder it gets." Amelia nodded. "Then maybe it's time I speak." But at home, motherhood remained her shield, her anchor. That evening, she sat on the floor with Oliver and Emma, fitting puzzle pieces into place. The twins looked up at her, oblivious to the chaos swirling outside their small world. "Mommy," Emma asked, "why do people take so many pictures of you?" Amelia swallowed hard, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Because they're curious, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups watch too much." "Do we have to smile?" Oliver chimed in. She pulled them both into her arms. "You only have to be yourselves. That's enough." In that moment, Amelia realized her fight wasn't just about Richard or justice or reclaiming her voice. It was about teaching her children something deeper, that survival wasn't shame, it was strength. That even when the world tried to break you, you could choose to stand. Meanwhile, Richard's paranoia grew close. Late at night, Charlotte found him pacing their penthouse living room, phone pressed to his ear. "Shut it down," he barked. "I don't care what it costs. I want every contract watertight. No leaks. No stories. Handle it." Charlotte watched from the doorway, silk robe trailing behind her. "Richard," she whispered, "maybe we should..." "Should what?" he snapped, spinning toward her. His face was wild, eyes bloodshot. "Listen to her lies? Let her drag us down." Charlotte flinched. For the first time, doubt flickered in her gaze. 2 days later, Amelia sat across from Claire and a lawyer friend, Evelyn Cho, in a quiet cafe. Documents spread between them, financial records, NDA drafts, names of silenced women. Evelyn tapped the stack with a manicured nail. "This is enough to open an investigation, if you're ready. But understand, once we move, there's no going back." Amelia closed her eyes, hearing the twins' laughter echo in her memory. She saw herself years ago, signing away shares in blind trust, watching Richard walk away with everything. She opened her eyes, steel in her gaze. "Then we move." That night, Amelia stood by her window, city lights glittering like broken glass. Below, the headline still burned across her phone, "The world hungry for more." But for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like Richard's shadow. She felt ready, and as Oliver and Emma slept peacefully in their beds, Amelia whispered to herself, a vow only the night could hear. "This time, he won't win." The envelope was thicker this time. Cream. Stock. Embossed seal. Legal weight. Amelia knew before she opened it. Her hands shook as she slit the edge, her twins' laughter echoing faintly from the living room. The words hit like a blade. Petition for full custody. Richard wasn't just striking back. He was aiming to rip her children from her arms. Claire found her in the kitchen minutes later, the paper trembling in Amelia's hand. "What is it?" Amelia's throat felt raw, her voice a whisper. "He's suing for custody. Full custody." Claims I'm unstable. Claire snatched the petition, scanning with practiced eyes. Her face hardened. He's playing dirty. This isn't about the kids. It's about breaking you. Amelia sank into a chair, chest tight. He's already taken everything. Our home, the company, my dignity. But this? My children. Her eyes burned, tears spilling unchecked. This is war. The courtroom was cathedral-like. High ceilings, marble walls, and the oppressive hush of judgment hanging in the air. Richard's legal team, 3 men in tailored suits and a woman with diamond-studded glasses, sat poised, confidence radiating across. From them, Amelia sat with Claire and Evelyn, hands folded tight in her lap. The twins were not present. Thank God. But their absence carved a hollow ache in her chest. Richard entered last, his presence sucking the air from the room. Immaculate as ever, navy suit, watch gleaming, smile rehearsed. He looked every bit. The successful CEO, the devoted fiancé, the picture of control. He didn't glance at Amelia. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. I own this room, the judge began. Richard's attorney rose, voice dripping with polished venom. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Hale, seeks sole custody of his children. While he has always acted in their best interest, their mother has demonstrated instability, emotional volatility, financial recklessness, and an inability to provide a secure environment. Amelia's jaw clenched. She wanted to shout, to object, but Evelyn placed a steadying hand on her arm. Wait. The attorney continued, laying out a portrait of Amelia that felt like a stranger, a woman spiraling, clinging to the past, humiliating herself at public events. They cited her dramatic outburst at the gala, twisted whispers into proof. Every sentence stripped away another layer of her dignity. When it was her turn to take the stand, Amelia's legs felt heavy, but she forced herself upright. Mrs. Hale, Richard's attorney began smoothly. You attended your ex-husband's engagement gala, correct? Yes. Her voice was firm, though her pulse thundered. And during this event, you confronted him, publicly, making accusations regarding his conduct. I didn't confront him. I responded. The lawyer smirked. By dragging your children into a high-profile event meant to celebrate their father's future happiness? Would you say that was in their best interest? Her chest constricted. She heard Claire's voice in her head. Don't let them bait you. I brought my children because I wanted them to see their mother stand tall, not hide. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The lawyer pressed on. Mrs. Hale, would you describe yourself as emotionally stable? The question was a knife. Yes. And yet you've admitted to crying in front of your children, have you not? To struggling with financial hardship? To relying on your sister for stability? Amelia's throat ached. Each word felt like an assault. I've cried in front of them because I'm human. I've struggled, yes. But I've never let my children go without love, without safety, without a home. Richard took the stand next, painting himself as the devoted father, the stable provider. His voice dripped with sincerity, eyes glistening at just the right moments. My only concern is for Oliver and Emma. They deserve stability, not drama. I don't want to take them from their mother. I only want what's best. It was performance, pure and calculated. Amelia wanted to scream. She wanted to rip away the mask and show the monster underneath. But the judge's gaze was cool, unreadable. During recess, Amelia sat trembling in the courthouse hallway. They're winning, she whispered. He's turning me into the villain. Claire crouched in front of her. Then we changed the narrative. How? Amelia's voice cracked, but a shadow fell across them. Evelyn looked up sharply as 2 women approached, strangers at first glance, until Amelia recognized one of them, a woman she had seen at Richard's offices years ago. Leaving his office in tears, the woman's hands shook as she spoke. We heard what's happening. We know what he's done. You're not alone. Another voice joined. He paid us to stay silent. NDAs. But if you lead the charge, if you fight, we'll fight with you. Amelia's breath caught. Allies. Proof she wasn't crazy, wasn't weak. Richard wasn't invincible. He was rotten, and the rot was spreading. Back in the courtroom, Amelia sat taller. When her attorney asked if she wanted to make a final statement, she stood. Your Honor, she began, voice trembling but steadying. With each word, I am not perfect. I have struggled. I have cried. I have rebuilt my life piece by piece after betrayal that would have broken most people. But my children? They have never gone without love, without safety, without me. Richard Hale can throw his money, his power, his lawyers at me, but what he cannot take is the bond between a mother and her children. She paused, locking eyes with Richard, and what he fears most is not losing custody, it's losing control. Over me, over them, over the story he's spun for so long. The room went still. For once, Richard's mask cracked. Just a flicker, but enough. When court adjourned for the day, Amelia stepped into the sunlight, chest rising with the first breath that didn't feel like suffocation. The battle wasn't over. Custody would be decided in hearings to come. But something had shifted. Her humiliation had become defiance. Her loneliness had become solidarity. And as she watched Oliver and Emma run toward her, arms wide, Amelia swore to herself, Richard might try to break her, but this time she had an army. The courthouse no longer felt like marble halls and hushed procedure. It felt like a battlefield. Every bench in the gallery was full, reporters with poised pens, investors with furrowed brows, women whose eyes carried stories they had never been allowed to tell. The air buzzed with a strange electricity. Everyone sensed it. This wasn't just a custody hearing anymore. This was the unraveling of a man who had built an empire on silence and intimidation. Amelia sat stiff in her chair, knuckles white around a tissue. Her children were with Claire at home, shielded from the storm. For them, Amelia would endure every scar. The judge called her to the stand. She rose, spine taut despite the weight of memory pressing on her shoulders. The opposing lawyer struck. First, voice sharp as a blade. Mrs. Hale, you claim your ex-husband mistreated you during your marriage. Can you provide evidence beyond your emotional recollections? Amelia swallowed hard, tears pricking. She could feel Richard's stare, cold, calculating, from across the room. My evidence, she said, voice quivering but gaining strength, is my life. For years, Richard Hale convinced me I was nothing without him. He told me signing away my shares was for our family. He belittled me when I questioned him. He gaslighted me until I doubted my own memory. That is abuse. Emotional scars don't come with balance sheets, but they are real. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The lawyer smirked. So, no proof, just stories. Before Amelia could respond, Claire rose sharply from the defense table. Your Honor, permission to submit Exhibit D. The judge nodded. Claire strode forward, heels clicking like gunfire, and placed a folder on the clerk's desk. Financial records, she said evenly, signed by Mr. Hale himself. Records showing he siphoned money from Hale Industries into personal accounts while presenting inflated profits to investors. Gasps broke out. Richard's lawyers scrambled, whispering furiously. Richard's jaw tightened, but his mask held. The judge peered down. This will be reviewed. Richard was called next. He adjusted his tie, his voice polished as ever. I am a father, he said, measured, careful. A provider. A man who has dedicated his life to building opportunity, not just for my children, but for hundreds of employees. My ex-wife paints herself as a victim, but the truth is, she is angry. She resents my success. She resents my happiness. And she is willing to destroy me, even if it means destroying our children's future. It was masterful. To the untrained ear, he sounded noble, generous, heartbroken. But then Evelyn, Amelia's attorney, rose. Mr. Hale, would you please explain these? She held up a stack of contracts. Non-disclosure agreements, signed by multiple women under your employment. Why, exactly, did Hale Industries pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to ensure their silence? Richard's smile faltered, just slightly, enough for cameras to catch. These were standard severance agreements. Standard? Evelyn cut in, with confidentiality clauses about personal misconduct. Your Honor, I call her next. Witness. The doors opened. A woman walked in, shoulders trembling but eyes steady. Amelia recognized her. It was the same woman who had approached her during recess days earlier. She took the stand, voice shaking at first but gathering strength. Richard Hale promised me mentorship. Instead, he cornered me in his office, told me if I didn't comply, I'd lose my job. When I tried to speak out, he threatened me. The NDA, her voice cracked, was the price of silence. The room erupted. Reporters scribbled frantically. Investors exchanged horrified glances. The judge banged the gavel for order. Amelia felt tears streaming down her cheeks, not of weakness, but of vindication. For years, Richard had held the narrative. Now the truth clawed its way to light. AS testimony piled on. More employees, a junior accountant with trembling hands who revealed doctored ledgers, a former investor who whispered of intimidation. Richard's empire began to splinter in real time. His lawyers objected furiously, trying to redirect. Focus back to custody, back to Amelia's supposed instability. But the narrative had slipped. The courtroom was no longer about a mother's tears. It was about a CEO's corruption. At one point, during a recess, Richard cornered Amelia in the hallway. "You think this makes you strong?" he hissed, mask shattered, his face red with fury. "Dragging me through the mud, parading your sob stories? You're pathetic. I made you. Without me, you're nothing." Amelia stood tall, heart pounding, but her voice steady. "No, Richard. Without me, you're exposed. You don't own this story anymore." His jaw flexed, fists clenched, but he stepped back, swallowed by cameras flashing like gunfire. When proceedings resumed, Amelia gave her closing testimony. She stood, tissue crushed in her hand, voice trembling with rawness. "I was humiliated, discarded, and silenced. I was told my pain wasn't real, that my voice didn't matter. But this trial, this moment, is proof that silence can be broken. I may lose everything else, but I will not lose my children. And I will not let them grow up believing power excuses cruelty." The courtroom was silent, every ear tuned to her. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. For the first time since the nightmare began, Amelia didn't feel like prey. She felt like fire. As the gavel struck to adjourn, whispers swirled like smoke. Headlines were already being drafted in frantic scrawls. CEO's empire at risk amid custody scandal. Ex-wife's testimony rocks Hale Industries. From philanthropist to predator, Amelia walked out into the blinding sun, Claire at her side. She knew the war wasn't won. The custody ruling was still to come, but she had shifted the ground. Richard Hale wasn't untouchable anymore. For the first time in years, Amelia exhaled without shaking. She had turned his weapons against him. And now, his empire was beginning to burn. The courtroom was thick with silence, the kind of silence that feels alive, buzzing with anticipation, threatening to break at the faintest sound. Reporters shifted in their seats, pens ready. Investors leaned forward, as though the fate of their fortunes hinged on the next breath. Amelia sat rigid at the defense table, her heart hammering in rhythm with the tick of the courtroom clock. The judge adjusted his glasses, a stack of papers before him. His expression gave nothing away. After reviewing testimony, exhibits, and witness accounts, he began, voice steady. "This court has reached a decision in the custody case of Hale versus Hale." Amelia's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Claire, beside her, slid her hand over Amelia's in quiet solidarity. Across the room, Richard sat with his attorneys, perfectly composed, or at least pretending. But Amelia noticed the slight twitch in his jaw, the restless tapping of his index finger against the armrest. Cracks in the mask, the judge continued. "Mr. Hale, your repeated attempts to discredit Mrs. Hale's parenting have not been substantiated. Instead, evidence presented demonstrates a troubling pattern of manipulation, intimidation, and misconduct on your part. Furthermore, this court cannot ignore the corroborated testimony regarding financial improprieties that may warrant federal investigation." The gallery stirred, whispers breaking loose like wildfire. Cameras clicked, capturing every twitch of Richard's carefully maintained facade. The judge's voice rose above the din. "Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that full physical and legal custody of the Hale twins is granted to their mother, Amelia Hale. Mr. Hale will retain supervised visitation rights pending further review." The words landed like thunder. Amelia felt her breath catch, an exhale that had been trapped inside her for years. She blinked rapidly, tears stinging, but kept her posture unbroken. Richard shot to his feet. "This is absurd. I am their father. I built everything for them, for her. This is a travesty." The judge's gavel struck, sharp and unyielding. "Mr. Hale, sit down. Outbursts will not be tolerated." Reporters scribbled frantically. Flashes from phones and cameras burst like lightning. Amelia didn't look at the gallery. She didn't look at the papers. She looked only at Richard. For years, his eyes had been a source of power over her, cold, commanding, a mirror of her humiliation. But now, when their gazes locked, she felt no fear, no hate, just a quiet, resolute stillness. He searched her face for something, rage, gloating, desperation, but found nothing. Her silence was heavier than any words she could have spoken. It was over. Outside the courthouse, chaos reigned. Mrs. Hale, how does it feel to win full custody? Do you believe Richard Hale should be indicted for fraud? What message do you have for women silenced by powerful men like him? Microphones shoved toward her, cameras closing in. Amelia paused at the courthouse steps, Claire by her side. She took a breath, steadying herself. Her voice, when it came, was calm and clear. My children are my victory. That's all I'll say. She turned, refusing to fuel the spectacle. It wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. Behind her, Richard was swallowed by a swarm of reporters, his composure crumbling. He barked. Denials, snapped at questions, his lawyers tugging at his sleeves. But the headlines were already writing themselves. Ex-wife wins custody. Hale empire in jeopardy. Judge condemns Richard Hale's manipulations. Fraud allegations shadow CEO as custody battle ends. And then, the news broke. A whisper turned into a roar. Federal investigators were circling. The financial records Claire had unearthed. The testimony of former employees. The trail of money siphoned into offshore accounts. It had all been forwarded to the authorities that Richard's empire was no longer just cracking. It was collapsing. Later, in the quiet of her sister's car, Amelia allowed herself to cry. Not the broken sobs of years past, but tears of release. Tears of survival. Claire squeezed her hand, saying nothing. No words were needed. Home. The twins came running to her, their little arms wrapping around her waist. Amelia knelt, holding them tight, inhaling the scent of their hair as though to ground herself in the only truth that mattered. You're staying with me, she whispered. Into their hair. Always. They giggled, unaware of the war their mother had just fought and won. Innocence was still theirs to keep. For now, Amelia thought. And that was enough. In the weeks that followed, the fallout grew louder. Board members distanced themselves. Share prices plummeted. Former allies turned to protect themselves. Federal subpoenas arrived at Richard's door. The man who once stood untouchable, worshipped, and feared now faced ruin. Not from some rival company, not from market collapse, but from the woman he believed he had destroyed. Amelia watched it unfold not with vindictive joy, but with something steadier. A quiet sense of justice. One evening, weeks after the verdict, she stood at her kitchen window, watching her twins chase fireflies in the fading light. She thought about the courtroom, about Richard's last outburst, about the years she had nearly lost herself. Her survival was her sharpest revenge. Her motherhood, her greatest triumph. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd never reclaim. Peace. The park was alive with the hum of late summer. Children shrieking in delight at the playground. The whir of bicycle. Wheels on the path. Dogs tugging at leashes as their owners called after them. Amelia walked slowly, savoring the warmth of the sun on her shoulders, her twins darting ahead to chase one another across the grass. Their laughter carried on the breeze, light and untarnished. For months, Amelia had lived for this sound. It was proof that innocence had survived the storm. She settled onto a bench beneath a towering oak, the shade dappling across her pale blue dress. She watched her children tumble in the grass, collapsing in giggles, then springing up again. So much energy, so much light. They had no idea of the battles fought in their name, of courtrooms and headlines, of whispers and betrayals. And she intended to keep it that way. Life after Richard had been unexpectedly quiet. Not easy. Nothing about rebuilding ever was, but quieter. The scandal had done what Amelia herself never needed to. It destroyed him. His empire crumbled under the weight of federal indictments. Investors fled. Former allies turned witness. His name became shorthand for arrogance and corruption, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. She remembered one headline that had caught her off guard a month ago. Richard Hale, from titan to tragedy. The photo beneath showed a man, hollowed out, skin drawn, eyes furious and desperate. Once, that image would have filled her with rage or vindication. Now, It stirred only a weary kind of pity. He had built his entire identity on power, wealth, control. And when those were stripped away, nothing remained. "Mommy, look," one of the twins called, holding up a handful of daisies. Amelia smiled, her chest loosening as she waved back. "They're beautiful, sweetheart." The other twin scrambled toward her, face flushed from play. "We're making you a crown," they announced, breathless. She laughed softly. "A crown? For me?" "Because you're the queen," they declared with childlike certainty, already weaving stems together clumsily. Her throat tightened. She blinked against the sting in her eyes, letting the moment anchor her. This was the real kingdom. Not marble offices, not glittering galas, not headlines. Just this: grass-stained knees, daisies in small hands, laughter carried on the wind. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet, Amelia would reflect on the path that had brought her here. The girl who once signed away her shares because she believed in love. The woman who endured humiliation in courtrooms. The mother who had stood unbroken before the man who wanted to erase her. She thought about the gala, the night Richard had planned as her final humiliation. How different it had turned out. He had sent her an invitation expecting her to bow, to shrink, to confirm the story he'd written for her. Instead, she had walked in with her children, head high, and turned his spotlight into his undoing. The irony never left her. He invited her to the stage, and she let him destroy himself upon it. Claire called often, sometimes just to check in, other times to remind Amelia of the strength she carried. "You won the war, sis," she said during one call. "But more importantly, you won yourself back." And it was true. Amelia no longer felt like a ghost tethered to her past. She had learned to inhabit her own life again, to build small joys and sturdy foundations. She found work consulting for nonprofits, quiet, purposeful projects that allowed her to use her intelligence without drowning in the ruthless games of corporate sharks. Her sister teased her, calling it her redemption tour, but Amelia simply smiled. She wasn't chasing redemption. She was living. The twins returned to her side, breathless and triumphant. One of them placed the lopsided crown of daisies on her head. "There," they said, beaming. Amelia touched the crown gently, the stems cool against her hair. "Do I look royal?" The children giggled. "The royalest." She laughed with them, her heart light in a way it hadn't been in years. A group of parents nearby recognized her, whispering as they glanced over. Amelia caught fragments. "That's her, Richard Hale's ex, custody case." But she didn't flinch. She had lived through louder whispers, stronger storms. Now, those murmurs no longer defined her. They were background noise, irrelevant against the sound of her children's laughter. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in pinks and oranges, Amelia gathered the twins to head home. They held her hands, swinging their arms in rhythm, chattering about dinner and bedtime stories as they walked down the path. Amelia turned her thoughts inward, forming the lesson that had crystallized over the months. Survival had been the sharpest revenge. Not because it destroyed Richard, though it had, but because it freed her. She understood now that the truest power wasn't in retaliation or spectacle. It was in resilience, in choosing to live fully, even after being broken, in showing her children that dignity outlasts cruelty. Richard had written a story of her downfall, but she had rewritten it as one of endurance. That night, after the twins were asleep, Amelia stepped onto her balcony with a cup of tea. The city hummed softly below, alive but distant. She closed her eyes, breathing in the cool night air. Her mind, she saw Richard one last time. His smirk at the gala, his rage in the courtroom, his hollow eyes in the tabloids. For the first time, she didn't feel the pull of his shadow. He was no longer her story. She whispered to the silence, not as a curse, but as a truth set free. "You never destroyed me. I survived you." And with that, she let go. Beneath her window, the laughter of her children echoed faintly in dreams, weaving into the night. Amelia smiled, placing the daisy crown on the nightstand beside her bed. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, but it's survival, and survival, she knew now, was the crown she would wear forever.